Hello, fellow travelers, and welcome to Versus Stars podcast. All my loyal listeners, thank you for your continued support. And remember, click the subscribe button, everybody. This is an amazing episode because Ryan Cady boards the mothership. We talk Haunt You to the End from Image Comics. Come on board to go traversing the stars.
Hello, Mr. Cady. Thank you so much for coming to Versus Stars podcast.
No, thanks so much for having me. Happy to be here.
Absolutely my pleasure, sir. So I always start off with a question of inspiration. To inspire your love for comics and who your earliest influences.
Oh man. You know, the earliest thing I remember really falling in love with comics wise was a lot of Walt Simonson Thor. A lot of random issues. I had a friend in elementary school who was like he was very into his Viking heritage. And what that meant was that his family was from somewhere in Scandinavia and he freaking loved Thor comics. So yeah, I would just like go over and read random runs. I remember like really trying to figure out as a young kid like how Beta Ray Bill fit into classic Norse mythology and what that meant. But yeah, so that I was really hooked on, and then Grant Morrison's JLA run. And then I kind of fell out of, I was kind of just doing trades when I was in high school and early college and stuff. And then I was also sort of like exploring more indie stuff and also getting into manga for a while and that sort of thing. And then when New 52 happened, actually, of all things, all of my friends started collecting again. And they were like, we have to get back into single issues. And they've like peer pressured me into being a single issue guy again. And, at that point, I'd already been, trying to write and trying to script and thinking about comics. And all of a sudden it became, there was just so many creators doing signings in the area where I lived. And you could meet these people and it felt like a much more real occupation. And so I sort of like felt really inspired to dive into that aspect of writing and not just prose or screenwriting and stuff.
So what were our thoughts on Beta Ray Bill? Did we like Beta Ray Bill?
We like Beta Ray Bill, right? He kind of rules.
I the big nerd. I am the administrator of the Beta Ray Bill appreciation group in Facebook.
Oh, I'll have to join. No, I think when you're really young, like if you read that and you're young, there is probably a little bit of a temptation to react like, well, where's my? I like my Thor. Where's my Thor?
Right.
But no, I think I actually went back and reread one of those Simonson omnibuses like a couple of years ago, and I was struck by when Beta Ray Bill's time was over. I was kind of like, oh, can we have a bit more time with him?
I'm amazed he's not made it to the movies yet. I really thought he was going to get in by now.
I especially with some of the really wacky stuff they've done in the more recent Thors, you'd think that it would be his time to shine, but maybe I don't know. I guess America's not ready for a space horseman. I guess and shame on them.
he is a great character, and I do like how close he is in many ways with Thor, but he's distinct in his own way.
Definitely, and it in a way that to me kind of feels like it really merges the like sci-fi fantasy, like literally elements of that. But Beta Ray Bill is such a spacey guy.
Yeah,
he is very cosmic, but he's got like such an old world sense of honor too, and like in ways sometimes even more than Thor. Right, which is so neat. I don't know. I think you're right. I think he feels so at home in that universe of storytelling.
So Walt Simonson, once again, he's famous for his. I mean, he had this long run of Thor. I mean, writers nowadays, especially in Marvel, don't have a run more than like 20, 30 issues. But he had, I can't remember how many issues he had, but what, it was like 60, 70 issues. He was on it for a while.
At least, right? Yeah, he's up there for sure.
So when we think about looking at his books and for his world building, does that influence how you go about building your worlds?
But you kind of hit the nail on the head there, is that unfortunately, we don't really get, especially in Marvel DC traditional superhero telling, we don't get those runs anymore. And a lot of writers I know have kind of adapted to the 6-issue or the single arc storytelling model, which isn't a bad model. Actually, I really like it. In my creator owns, I kind of gravitate towards that model in some ways. But there is there is that like nostalgia is not even the right word. That genuine like, well, we used to be able to do it this way. That you could like if you're going to introduce, if you're like writing Thor today and you're going to introduce Beta Ray Bill, you'd get maybe like, he'd have like a 2-issue arc. And then it'd be like, back, there would be no time for breathing room or getting to know him or explore a vast cosmology, which is, of course, a shame.
Now, the 6-issue, basically what we're talking about is sort of like the trade paperback writing right now. You ready for the trades? Is usually what they say.
Yeah.
So is that primarily economics, you think, or is that primarily just because the reality of print, how long you're going to be on a project for?
We'll call him A, we'll call him B for sure. At the publisher level, it's definitely a much more economic thinking. Which isn't just like a number, like a raw, money size of the market game. Like it's also that there are a lot more cool indie publishers. There's a lot more people in the mix, so it's not necessarily a bad thing. But I think in terms of the other side of things, or like writing for the trade, I think it is a good approach. I think it has its merits, and it's again, it makes sense, and it helps keep you grounded in when you're doing a creator owned, when you could be tempted to go off the rails, or like keeps you losing yourself. But I don't know, there is something sort of, you're limiting yourself, right? You're sort of like embracing a formula, and it does, because I think a lot of creator-owned comics, especially 5 or 6 years ago, got unfairly maligned about this. But there is a bit of truth to it, in that this does feel more like it's a pitch to another medium now. When you're chaining yourself inside arcs like this and these ways of storytelling and thinking and putting stuff out, it's like, look how easily adaptable this is. You can see your act here, your scene here. This fits. You want to option this and make a thing out of it.
Yeah.
Which obviously, I also want to option my things.
Honestly, from the creator standpoint, creator-owned standpoint, the fastest way to make to be successful, make profitability on your comic is to be optioned.
Right. Yeah.
I mean, that's just the economics of it. I mean, I think at the creator level, most of us are not becoming rich or can quit our day jobs just doing creator-owned work. But you get one character, on Netflix, you're pretty much set for a while.
Exactly. Then you can start thinking about your 50-issue creator-owned run, ongoing experience.
I'm telling you, that is extremely helpful. Like, well, I guess I can now afford to sit back and think about, your own Walking Dead, your own Invincible, your own.
Exactly. It's I don't know. It's not as dire as it sounds, but yeah. I mean, that is the unfortunate reality of it.
Oh, trust me, I do indie writing on the side. Not obviously at your level, but indie writing. An option would be very nice right about. So thinking about things of the shorter run. So you're currently the writer of Haunt You to the End.
Yes.
Now, is that a series that is looking at 6 issues, or is this something that's going to be more like The Walking Dead, and we're going to see issue like 70 of Haunt You to the End?
It's only a 5-issue, so it's the last issue is going to be coming out in October, I believe. And it was engineered that way. I didn't I had one set story I wanted to tell. It's pretty contained. That being said, if inexplicably it's like just the best-selling trade ever, and they want more, I have like spin-off ideas. But the book itself, I do feel like is very much like a contained set story that I wanted to tell, which was nice.
I'll say, as every good writer should, right? I mean, everyone has an idea of like, if it gets big, this is book 2.
Yeah, you don't want to limit yourself too much. And with an ensemble, and I'm sure this as a writer, or have experienced this as a writer, that when you're dealing with like an ensemble cast, especially, sometimes you like fall a little bit too in love with other characters who aren't the ones that you need to be focusing on.
Oh, current book I'm working on through Kickstarter. I had the first book already kickstarted, and then I'm getting the next. It's called The End of All Terminus. It's a big cast, and then I keep finding, like, I keep creating new characters. I'm like, well, unless this goes on for 1,000 issues, I probably need to slow things down a bit. And same thing when you think about the Haunt You to the End, right? Because you're thinking of 5 issues. Does that affect how you organize the amount of characters you have in your comic? Do you think, well, maybe I need to take away a character, or because I don't have the time to develop? Or do you think to yourself, I can focus on this character, these 2 or 3 characters? How does that affect your approach to the story?
Definitely, it totally factors, how much real estate you have for everybody. I will say, having the 5 issues, a lot of publishers, you can only really get a 4 issue arc deal right now, depending. And so it's nice to have the guaranteed 5, and that made me feel comfortable doing a real ensemble, having like 4-ish main characters, instead of like with Infinite Dark, that I also did with Andrea Muti at Top Cow. We ended up getting 8 issues, but we only thought we were getting 4. So while we also tried to do a bit of ensemble and give background and depth to all the characters, we had a main character we had to focus. Whereas like now with that extra issue and intentionally telling an ensemble story, I'm like, yeah, all 4 of these could be the protagonist. It just maybe seems like a little bit gets slightly more screen time or has the more compelling motives.
So when you have issues, I mean, the nice thing about being fully indie, even though other than the fact there's no money, is the bad part. But the problem, obviously, it can be as long as I feel like, and I don't have to promise anything. When you do something for Image, you say I'm doing 4 issues or 5 issues. You got 5 issues, let's say. So how much plotting and mapping are you doing, and how much can you let the story breathe and tell it the way you want to tell it?
I've a surprising amount. I've in How You to the End, for example, there are whole subplots that were in my original base outline that were just cut out. Like I removed a whole set piece, and mainly it was just because I wanted to let characters breathe more. It's sort of so to a degree, I am able to let the story breathe, but unfortunately only in the opposite direction. I can cut things and then let it really breathe and feel it out. But if I if I want to add stuff, I'm in trouble. But I think I like to think of myself as a pantser, the plotting pantsing debate thing. But I need to have some sort of pitch or outline document that I can break away from. You need like a skeleton to break the bones of and get out of.
Is there something helpful about knowing you're limited? In other words, by keeping yourself forced into being focused into this direction, does it help knowing then what matters and what doesn't matter in the story?
Absolutely, 100% it does. It forces you to prioritize, and because you have a scale that's enforced, you're like, okay, I know what kind of story I need to tell and what kind of things can happen. It's kind of like similar to, but for different reasons, why sometimes I often prefer a for hire project to a creator owned concept, because if I'm writing a Green Lantern story, like I know what to aim for. I know who Green Lantern, like I know what I like about this idea and how much that resonates with other people to a certain degree, obviously. And you have like some sort of guidepost. It's nice to have that, however much you adhere to it. And likewise, but with the creator owned thing, you're kind of like, well, I know I like this. It's my idea. I care about it. I'm excited to tell it, but I don't really have any guidelines. It's just all me, and I have no idea, what other people are going to like about it compared to what I like about it. That makes sense.
No, you're kind of talking about like a leap of faith. I'm hoping that I like it, so you like it.
Yeah, exactly. A leap of faith.
Yeah, I tell you the same thing. I'm writing my 3rd issue of that story that I started, and I'm realizing that I can write this issue because it's just me owning it, but I have no idea if it's taking me right off the rails. And I'm just crossing my fingers, like, just how if you like it, someone else hopefully does, or you just have really bad taste in stories.
You're like, well, yeah, either way, if I have terrible taste in stories, I can't be the only one, because I've gone through life this long. So maybe other people who have terrible taste in stories will like my terrible stories.
That's actually a very valid point. That's my philosophy now. If I suck, someone sucks too, and they'll enjoy my work.
You gotta have a silver lining.
Now, one complicated thing is that your Haunting to the End is definitely a horror in the horror genre. Now, how difficult is horror to convey in single panel comic books?
It's it's tricky. It's tricky in that you can't rely on a lot of the cheats that you get in other horror
You can't
media.
jump scare, I imagine.
You can't jump scare. I regularly will though say page turn fake jump scare panel, in that like I can have a panel that ends on the page turn have like something really ominous appear, and then it can either be a fake out or a real scare depending on how I want tension to build. But it is, obviously you can't enforce sound, you can't enforce any other senses. But the one thing that I do kind of like about it, kind of to talk about Grant Morrison a little bit again, in that Pax Americana issue of Multiversity, Captain Atom like picks up the comic and is like, oh, like explaining how it's like a fourth dimensional experience where the only thing that the panels control is like the flow of time or whatever. And when this is really long-winded and weird, but I promise I have a point. When I was working on Wolfsbane on Line Webtoon with Morgan Beam, our editor like sat us down once and talked to us and was like, look, the whole advantage of this vertical scrolling panel format, but it does still apply to comics as well, regular one. He's like, the whole advantage of this is that, yeah, you can't control all these other things. You can't control how fast they scroll through it. You can't control, like what sounds they're going to hear or what sounds they're going to think of or this or that. And he's like, but you do control like the planar two-dimensional experience of what panel happens in what order and how that tension will build. And like, I don't know, there's more to that, that comic experience. But I always am like, yeah, that is horror though. Like if I'm controlling the order, that not the order but the ultimate like arc of tension, how it ramps, like that is how horror functions, is like the creator like controlling that arc, I guess.
Did you ever follow the Jeremy Adams Flash run?
No, I'm not. I'm a little bit behind on my Flash stuff.
All right, I can't remember the damn issue. I wish I did. It was 780, something like that, 782 maybe. I don't know, someone will figure it out, maybe they can put it in comments. But there's an issue of Flash where they break the fourth wall, and the whole point of the journey is that the reader has to do things with the comic book to allow the heroes to go to where they're supposed to go to. So you must turn the comic upside down, must do this, and then thank you, so we can help jump to the clip. It's really fascinating how he does it.
That's
but I mean, there's a creepiness to it, but it's interesting. When you talk about Morton, I was like, first I hadn't read that one, but it brought me directly to the Flash story. I was like, actually, that's kind of interesting how he put that all together. So I recommend checking out if you want to see someone trying to experiment with.
Really cool.
Yeah, I can't remember which one it is, but it's with the Flash and Dr. Fate appears.
Okay. Wait, that does sound familiar. Actually,
yeah.
I can kind of picture that. Okay. Yeah, that's from like late last year, right?
I think so. Yeah. And that one's got me thinking about, because it's someone trying to experiment with the medium of comic book reading, and it was kind of interesting in that way. For my own side,
I'll check that out. Thank you. Yeah,
no worries. So the art is being provided by Andrea Muti. Sorry, apologies, Andrea Muti. So how do you make sure that Andrea fit the tone you were going for with the artwork?
Well, actually, it kind of was the other way around, honestly. Andre and I had worked together on Infinite Dark, and so we got along well. We'd always talked about doing another book together, and we just didn't have the time, or never came together. We're on other projects, and then one day he emailed me and was like, "Hey, like, let me show you my latest book. I'm like really proud of it. It's pretty cool. What do you want to work on? It'd be cool if we could work on something next. I'm going to be free in like 6 months or whatever." And he sent in all these new pages, and it's the books that he had done for Dark Horse and Aftershock, like Maniac of New York, and Buddy Mask and stuff. And they had his sort of new watercolor style that he sort of had recently adopted in the last couple of years, where everything is sort of like washed out and muddy and like dreary in like the most beautiful, haunting way. And I was like, whoa. I was just something like, we need to do a book. We need to do a book, and it needs to look like this. And my first thought was like something with weather. I was like, I need to do a weather book with Andrea, because like in this style, if everything's just like mud and water and like gloomy rain and like lightning and shit, I'm like, this is acid greens and stuff. I'm like, yeah, dude, I really want to do something in this. And so I kind of worked back from there. I just was sort of like, well, what's weather horror? Like what is that? And I just love haunted house stuff. And we're living in the end times anyway. I mostly joke. Mostly.
But we'll see. In 50 years later, when it's not so funny.
Yeah. And so it wasn't a leap to be like, well, it'd be really cool to do like what's like the last haunted house on Earth, like what's that like? So that's kind of from there how I sort of reverse engineered this idea, and he liked it. So
I mean, it's a cool concept, and I love the horror ghost story aspect to the story. I'm gonna get into that quote that you used in the Inside Cover, which I think was awesome. But how does the dystopian environmental thing connect to the ghost story aspect of the same story?
I mean, for me, it's sort of like there's all the sort of more obvious stuff, like like the Earth is dying, ghosts, that sort of thing. I talked about this with some friends recently. Like there's this haunted island, and the idea that like things are dying there, and like it's also they've struck oil on this island, and the idea of like, well, like what is oil kind of, but like ghost power. It's like dead animals and dinosaurs like mooshed into carbon fuel, and it's like that's kind of ghostly, and like really sort of playing with that and feeling that. But ultimately it's more of a like I think I'm terrified of death, and I'm sort of fascinated with this idea of like, well, more people should be fucking freaked out about it 24/7. But so my work is I'm trying to confront that a little bit, and these characters, not all of them, but especially the billionaire Callum Shaw who's funding the expedition is sort of like, he's like, hey, I'm just trying to prove that there's something more, and if the world's ending, like if people are like running out of hope, at the very least, can't we, like, what if we could, kind of harkening back almost to like 1800s era spiritualism of like, what if we could give people some sort of quasi-scientific proof that there's something more? Like, wouldn't that make everything better? Like, wouldn't everybody do a little better? And so whether that is a fool's errand or perhaps even more dangerous, people will have to wait until the last issue to sort of make those conclusions.
Well, you use a great quote, Stanley Kubrick quote, where you basically say that as referencing ghost stories being optimistic because it proves life after death, or life survives our deaths. In that sense. So part I was thinking about from a ghost standpoint, is that inherently optimistic that you're a ghost? Because that doesn't necessarily mean it's a good thing.
That's true. Well, and that it's funny that was sort of that quote that you bring up that I put at the front. When Kubrick said that to King over the phone, King was like not happy. He was like, "What the fuck is this guy talking about? He's missing the Tabitha. He's missing the whole point." And he was like, "Well, what about hell?" was his response. He was like, "Hell's not optimistic."
Right.
And Kubrick was like, "I don't know. Ghosts don't make me think about hell. Ghosts just make me think about like heaven and moving on." But I do agree, and I also think that like the existence of non-physical life is not necessarily a guarantee of some sort of magical life after death, and like the existence of something that seems like a ghost might not guarantee, so like even that might not be a guarantee, right? It could be something horrible that is scientifically explainable just in ways we never thought, or like you said, that's ghosts, and being trapped is not necessarily ideal, as much as you might be like, well, I don't want to end. Like, what if your existence was like the spiritual equivalent of dying slowly in a tar pit,
Right. So many possible ways to go with this.
we try to keep it light over here.
So one of the characters is, you said it's Callum Shaw, is how he says the last name?
Yeah,
Shaw. And he's fascinated by the potential of ghosts. So how much of his backstory are we going to get, and why is he specifically interested in? Is it just, as you said, well, is he like this altruistic, guess what, world, everything's fantastic? Or is he more in the nefarious, there's a reason why he's really that interested?
I don't I don't want to like spoil things, but I maybe I should. I think that Shaw, to me at least, is almost exactly what he seems. You know, he's a really terrified guy who happens to have all the resources of the world at his disposal. And you know, I know that there's it's not as sexy if he doesn't have like an evil scheme, but I think it's really more that there's just it's a desperate scheme. It's like what can I do? I can't take it with me. So like what can I throw? How many lives can I risk? How much money can I burn? How irresponsible can I be in the pursuit of possibly maybe finding an answer? And if I get it, will it be enough?
Yeah, I think that's absolutely fascinating because you kind of gave him a little bit more of an altruistic viewpoint. But as you mentioned, he's endangering others to get there. So how many people can die for him to prove his point?
Exactly, right. And also like the irony of like even if people on the expedition didn't die, well, a lot of people had to die eventually because they were ghosts and he had to meet them. But
Right.
no, I think also there's the sort of obvious like maybe too in your face metaphor that I resisted trying like stating outright is that like it's kind of the same as hey, you could use your billions of dollars to help fix the world, or you could build yourself a special rocket to go to space for you.
Mm.
Hooray. You know, or like a crazy submarine, or you could, you know, spend that money trying to help people or make the world a better place. And, you know, the sort of subtext for Callum Shaw is like the world is in a lot of trouble and it
Mm.
is only ever getting worse. And rather than spending your money and resources and all this stuff at trying to maybe make things better here, you're looking for somewhere else to go. You
Mm.
know, you're looking for a Mars colony you can wander off to and leave the rest of us here to die on our choking Earth, you know. And you know, even if you do find that answer, does that necessarily mean your quest was noble? I guess.
Mm. Well, one interesting thing is that, as you mentioned about the island, that it's has murder, suicides, mass illness of the nature. So, or is it the individual's ghosts that are haunting, or is there something going on with the island itself that makes it haunting?
The island is definitely a unique place. I will say that. There are definitely what clearly appear to be apparitions of people who have died there, but something about the island does seem to encourage like extreme behavior and seems to bring death, I guess you might say. Like it seems to want to hold souls in its grasp.
So, are we looking at an Overlook Hotel situation?
Oh, you know, well, actually, yeah, honestly, now that you mention it, to some degree, I think. I don't want to give too much away, but specifically, I don't know. This isn't a line in The Shining, but in some other book, I think Jerusalem's Lot, King has a line where he's talking about like places where the milk of the cosmos has curdled and gone sour or something. And, you know, it's like a little flowery, and there's more to it in Honey to the End. There's a little bit more of an angle to it, but I do think there is this ultimate, and Hill House obviously is all about this as well. As the sometimes places are there can be a bad place, and like it is geospatial. Like the space is something is wrong here, but it also might not be limited to that place. Like
Mm.
what if it could spread everywhere? You know, that sort of thing.
So, Matt Park is sort of like the protagonist, I guess. Him or Shaw would be the protagonist. I guess it's Mark. Matt Park is
He's
the
our
protagonist.
he's our viewpoint intro character, sort of. Yeah. He is our closest thing to a protagonist, simply because he's the man behind the camera and he's our guy that we view this world through.
So he mentioned that he basically, if I'm understanding correctly, his motivation more for the most part is money. He thinks this is easy because no go. So one way or another, it's just way to get paid. So as a skeptic, what would the existence of ghosts mean to him? Is he at all contemplating what would it mean if it actually turns out to be true?
No, he is not at all ready at all, even a little bit. Uh, Matt, like I love him. He sucks. He is a man at rock bottom, uh, professionally and financially and personally. He's just kind of like going through the motions, and he is presented like the opportunity of a lifetime. But the caveat is that like it's something he doesn't believe in, and it's sort of admitting that his whole angle, his whole perspective on life, the kind of things he likes to write about, the way he feels about the world, it's basically chucking that all out the window. So he has to sign away everything to go do this. And on the one hand, if he goes there and there are no ghosts and he's proven totally wrong, it's yeah, he gets his money, but it doesn't help his career. And what again, once again, more of just like wasted time. On the other hand, he goes there and is totally destroyed as a person if ghosts are real.
So how to use another TV show reference? How much Scully is he? Because I felt like in X Files with Scully, every time she sees all this crazy stuff, then she's like, "Well, you never know for sure." It's like, well, no, you saw the ghosts, you saw the aliens, you saw this. How But she kept always being like, "I'm the skeptic." How much proof does he need in order for him to go, "Okay, I'm totally wrong on this"?
yeah, he's not as bad or good, depending on your perspective, as Scully. He is, I think he, more than a lot of the other characters, always maintains the skeptical pessimism. When he is encountered with things beyond explanation, he is sort of willing to admit that there's something crazy here, but he will often be the first person to be like, that doesn't mean it's good. This could just be worse. He is sort of his angle. So he has the I don't think Scully is as much of a downer in that way, but there is sort of that every time Mulder is like excited because a fucking spooky thing showed up, Scully has to be like, well, it could just be a horrible serial killer. He's going to murder us. Um, so that's sort of his Matt's journey to be on.
So even if Matt is a skeptic, does he have any kind of existential kind of framework to fit ghosts into it when he sees one? In other words, does he, just because you're a skeptic of ghosts doesn't mean you're not a skeptic of everything? Does he have that kind of framework to fit that into his life that he can handle? Or this is going to be like total mental breakdown? I can't believe everything I ever thought of is 100% wrong.
You talk about mental framework. In the Looney Tunes, when Sylvester is like building a plank and then another plank and then another plank, and then someone takes the plank from behind him, but he's still building out into thin air for a while before he falls to his death. That's sort of what Matt's that's his framework of philosophy for what he's about to encounter. No, I think he is one of the advantages of being at rock bottom as a person is that it's going to be hard for him to take another hit to his dignity and admit that he's wrong. But in terms of actually dealing with it, it's like, well, does this really make my life that much worse being attacked by a ghost? Like it's kind of novel. There are pluses and minuses to the experience.
Now, with being a journalist, was he a good journalist or just the right journalist for this?
Well, at this point, he is not a good journalist. I see Matt as not a sellout. I think he became a clout chaser. I think he started as a pretty decent journalist, and he is the kind of guy who, in our day and age, would turn into like kind of like an internet clickbaity type guy. And I think he just sort of like, again, not in this sort of like 90s idea of selling out, like in like selling out your soul and your integrity, but more, I just think he prioritized a certain like brand and clout chasing and perception, and over the years, and he just sort of he lost all integrity, he lost work, he stopped being popular. I have a line in the first issue where he's like, you haven't had journalistic integrity since you stopped writing for the Guardian. And like, this isn't in the book, but in my head I'm like, he hasn't written for the Guardian in years. So I think there's sort of like there is a moment later on, about halfway through the series, I think in issue 4, this is a little bit of a preview, where he has a sort of journalistic crisis of conscience and has to be like, oh yeah, is this what I actually am? Like, am I really here as a reporter? And if so, is this right to do? So,
well, because that does pose an interesting question. Let's say I get where Shaw's coming from, the idea that if you can prove there's an afterlife, people may feel better about things because there's no oblivion. Oblivion seems like a worse alternative than an afterlife.
Yeah.
However, it's a hell of a gamble to think that people will take it in the best way possible and not freak the hell out. Mm-hmm. So when thinking about Matt, is he think like, let's say it does get to the point where he has some evidence, does he then, is there any question of will the world be better off knowing it or not?
I will say that will be answered in the book.
All right, fantastic. So what can
and there's another interesting twist on that angle too that I won't bring up because it's a spoiler. But yeah, it is a factor for sure.
So what can readers look forward to in the next issues of Haunt You to the End?
Well, if they like ghosts, they're in for a real treat.
Fantastic.
Ghosts and Weather. Issue 3 is like my big, perhaps literally, perhaps just metaphorically explosive issue. I think issue 3 is just really bombastic, and Andrea's drawn some insane, crazy shit in that one. I think they should get ready to be surprised by some characters and to be not surprised by others. And rest assured, Gersh will continue to be a badass, I guess I will say.
So is this being optioned by Netflix, Peacock, Paramount, or Amazon?
Great question, listeners. Great question. One's knocking. I don't. One of the places I signed at, the retailer, he was like, "Yeah, I've just been telling people it's aliens, but ghosts, but ghost hunters." And I'm like, "Oh fuck, yeah, that's what it is. It's just aliens meets Ghostbusters." So I got like, somebody's got to want that, right? Peacock, yeah.
At the end of every book, there's just please buy my rights. No, just kidding. At the end.
Haunt You to the End, a to-be original movie.
You know what? Everyone should just start posting that in their comic books. Soon to be a feature film, and then just hope. I mean, you never know. Soon is such a subjective term.
Yeah. Soon. This book takes place in like 2099. That's soon.
That's awesome. So, but when's issue 2 going to be ready?
I believe next Wednesday. I am all turned around because of San Diego Comic-Con and stuff at the end of this month as well. So I'm like, are we that Wednesday of San Diego Comic-Con or the Wednesday after? But this month, very soon. And then issue 3 right after, kind of mid-August. And then issue 4 September, and Halloween spooky time just in time for our big conclusion.
Very cool. Mr. Cady, it was an absolute honor to speak with you, sir. Thank you so much.
No, thank you so much, Jeff. Have a blast. You too.